This is Karen with newclevelandradio.net, and it is time for Avoid the Maze, You Are Special. And my guest today, if I would have interviewed you 13 years ago, Neena, I would have said, I have no right to interview you. I mean, who am I? I'm just a lowly little podcaster sitting in my home studio.
Crazy.
I know that's not the truth anymore. And when I read your bio, it's exciting because you have taken a path that so many of us probably dream about taking, but we're so afraid to take that step. So, Neena, tell us a little bit about who you are and why you happen to be in Cincinnati, Ohio.
Um, we're hearing that is always strange, because when you're inside, I look at you with awe. We all look at other people just at their bio list of things, and it always, I think, from the outside might seem different than from the inside. But
Exactly.
if my cousin Ron Bloomberg, a comedy writer who died recently in his 90s, were here, he would have pulled out an envelope and it would have said, I predict that in 2024, you will be at Cincinnati Playhouse in the Park, because he would have a comedy routine where he would unseal the envelope. But no, I can't say I predicted anything about this path. And I started off wanting to write, not sure what form it was going to be. I had very encouraging parents, indulgent even, I would say, and the first wave of feminism. So both my mother and father really wanted my sister and myself to just go for whatever we wanted, which was an incredible privilege. And I remember my mother, who started a business when she was 40 that became a really successful advertising agency in Miami. And she went with her friend, Priscilla Mann, to hear Gloria Steinem speak. And my mom said, I'm so happy this is happening for my daughters. And Priscilla said, well, what about you, Joyce? Don't you want a piece of the action? And then she started her ad agency. So kind of similar to what you were saying about, well, what is it that I always wanted to do? So for me, I joke that I once met a man who repairs lutes. This is true. He really does repair lutes. And I said, how did you end up repairing lutes? Like, is that a path that you anticipated? And he said, well, it was a series of bad decisions. So I joke. I became a playwright through a series of bad decisions, but I am joking because I do enjoy this path that I'm on and the maze that I'm in. But I really began maybe wanting to write poetry. A lot of it was fear-based in the sense that I really valued poetry and so was a little afraid to do it. And playwriting felt like, oh, it's a craft and I can learn a craft. It's not just writing. There's a reason to go to school. So I got out of college. I worked for the Letterman show. I was like, I don't know that there's a role for me on the Letterman show that is exciting to me, even though from the outside that seemed like an exciting
Sure.
world to be in. And then I went back to graduate school, got an MFA in playwriting. And that was, a very kind of conventional beginning to a playwriting career.
So, so many of us have these dreams and we start dreaming when we're, little kids. Oh, this is who I want to be when I grow up.
Mm-hmm.
And I know I had several paths that where I wanted to be.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes it's those outer sources that are telling us you can't go there. You were
Mm-hmm.
very lucky. Like you said, you had parents who said, follow your dream, follow your path.
Yes.
And
Very lucky in that. Yeah.
and it had to have been tough when you're working for someone like David Letterman, and everybody probably thinks, oh, that's the best job in the world. Don't you ever leave it. But you knew that it just wasn't right. Do you know what that thing was that said, hey, Neena, get out of here. You need to do something else.
Well, I really wanted to write in some fashion. And I knew that, and I was actually interested in kind of, I hate the term experimental theater, but I was drawn to pretty out there theater. And I did not see myself in the comedy room of the Letterman show. I was in an entry-level job, mind you. I was just, answering phones. I ended up booking guests. There were many reasons that it ultimately felt like it wasn't where I wanted to stay. But one was that I did not see myself in the writer's room. Now, of course, I did not see any women in the writer's room. I saw a lot of guys in baseball caps in the
Right.
writer's room. Nell Scovell really broke that barrier in a fantastic way. She's got a great book that I love that anyone interested in comedy writing should read. But so I wanted to be in a different world, and I wanted to be able to write for a couple of years. And I did get kind of a grant, so I didn't have to pay to go to grad school. And I went for 2 years, giving myself the gift of just really being able to write and finding a community of people who were also interested in the same things.
So, what is the difference between playwriting and writing for a sitcom? Because I understand it's not the same
Sure.
at all.
Well, it's funny because when I started out now a few decades ago, I felt like TV was not that interested in playwrights. Now they really are, and they just gobble them up. But they were very separate worlds. And so I felt in the TV world, it was pretentious to say I was a playwright. And in the playwriting world, it was very down market to say TV, which it's all flipped. And it shows you just can't buy into any of the boxes people want to put things in. And but I did start writing TV and sitcoms, which is a multi-camera, not so in fashion anymore, form of TV, is very dialogue driven, and it's taped live, and it has a lot of similarities to playwriting in a sense. Now, the TVs that we usually see that are more like movies now and are single camera are more visual forms and visual storytelling, but there's certainly a true overlap. They're more collaborative with other writers, but essentially it's storytelling, as is a podcast, as is theater, music theater, singing, making your own songs. It's all storytelling. And so I think those of us drawn to telling stories can find different venues and different mediums to do it, but there's a big similarity as well. We can get into like the tiny differences of, when you think of, you're thinking of a screen instead of thinking of a stage. And when I've taught, I've always told students, if you look at a theater script, the dialogue goes across the page and the stage action is indented. In TV and film, it's the reverse, because the dialogue is indented and the visuals go across the page because it's driven more visually. So I think that's sort of a literal difference, but we're just telling stories.
So, you come up with an idea, you start writing, you now have this script, and somebody else is going to go out and get the actors and actresses to play those parts. What's it like for you seeing it come alive? Because sometimes it's not even in the same format.
And you mean in film or in TV or in theater or any of it?
Either way, because either way.
And sometimes someone's come to you with an idea too, by the way. There's all different forms of it happening, as you know. But so I still find it really exciting, sometimes heartbreaking, but sometimes amazing. I started writing lyrics and book for musical very late. I did not write the lyrics to the show I'm doing here. Well, an incredible lyricist, Jocelyn McKenzie and Jeremy Lloyd Stiles are the music team. They did all the songs. But I went to a program called BMI, Lyman Engle Music Theater Workshop, and that was only like not, I want to say 2016 or something. I was one of the oldest people in the room, and I would look around and think, oh my God, like these people, most of them in the room could live their entire lives again, and they would still be younger than I am. So it was a humbling experience, but being a playwright and I would say a TV writer, you have to have a pretty thick skin, and it's hard and to develop that. I've seen very, very talented people, far more talented people who just really couldn't handle that. And I saw it happen even in at BMI, where it's a very critical room, but you have to remember that it was kind of fortunate to be my age and new at something and wanting to learn it, and then having the perspective that they're just trying to help me get better, and they believed in me enough to let me in here. So I'm going to kind of try very hard to be humble about it and learn, because I know I don't know what the heck I'm doing. So that was a great experience in the process. Now, the collaboration is exciting because often, it's not quite how you envisioned it, but maybe it's better. And I was bringing up BMI because nothing to me is more exciting than writing words that somebody else has turned into music. Like, I can't believe it still. I look at the score, I hear the singer. It's kind of like, oh my God, that is so cool. It's not in my wheelhouse to be able to write music. And so having that happen feels really magical in some ways still. And I hope it will continue to feel magical. So, yeah.
And that has to be a very good feeling. My, excuse me, one of my brothers is a music producer, and he just probably in the last 5 to 10 years has been writing lyrics. And I didn't even know that. And
Oh, wow.
he
Yeah.
he sent me something that had been recorded, and I knew the performer, and I said, "Oh, he's excellent." He said, "So you like the theme of it?" I said, "Oh, the theme, everything, and the words." And he goes, "Oh, you're listening to the words." And he couldn't help it. And he said, "Do you know who wrote that?" And I assumed it was the performer. And I
Yeah,
said, "I'm
yeah.
sure Jeff did." And he goes, "No." He said,
Amazing.
"It's something I've always wanted to do."
It's so
Now,
great.
now I listen to music totally different. I don't necessarily listen. It's the performer's words, whose words.
Right. It's funny that happens, I think, in theater too. Like, I've had people, it's kind of great when somebody might believe that the performer is that character.
Yeah,
And you're like,
exactly.
but often not at all like the character they're playing. So that's, yeah, it's funny.
So as I mentioned, you happen to be in Cincinnati. You have a play that is opening. So tell us a little bit about it so we can let our listeners know and follow you along the way.
Well, and hopefully, if anyone is in the area, come to see this show, which I think is a really beautiful show. It's called Rutka, and it's based on a real diary of a young woman who kept a diary for 4 months during World War II. And this diary kind of remained, no one knew about it. And then eventually was the woman who had held on to the diary, who was a friend of Rutga's for decades. It emerged, I can tell you that whole story, but so it got published, and the producers of this show decided it would make a good musical, which is kind of maybe almost as crazy as when Lin-Manuel decided that Hamilton would make a good musical, but he sure wrote a great musical. But so it is set in the Holocaust, and so there's some darkness, of course. I mean, it's a tragic, tragic story, but the part that isn't tragic is this incredible spirit of Rutka. Her words, her spirit, her joy, her hope are really embodied in this beautiful diary that she kept, and this story that we're trying to tell feels very relevant, sadly, very relevant right now.
And as I'm thinking about this and you opening up this coming week, it comes at a phenomenal time. Number one,
Yeah.
it's before the election, but it's right after the Jewish New Year. And so many of us are sitting around, and I've been reading on Facebook, this is one year that I need to be alone. I need to observe alone. And I want to shake people and say, we don't need to be alone. We need to be together. And I'm sure in this diary, there's probably a lot of alone time for this individual.
Absolutely, which she talks about some, but what's interesting that you have mentioned, because we're like, what distinguishes this from the beautiful diary kept by Anne Frank? And that is that she wasn't in hiding. She was in a ghetto in Benzin, Poland, and out in the world with her friends. And so her friends are very much a part of the diary. And she is trying to find the moments, and there's all the teenage angst and love and friendship and gossip while the world is closing in around them. So, and hoping to find a way to resist together with other young people. So in that diary, you see how much her friend group meant to her as any teenager. We faced it in its own, obviously in a much smaller and different way, but during the pandemic, when I had two teenagers, and it felt like the isolation was not going to work. So how would they meet up? How finding each other in parks, outdoors, feeling like a little scared for them, but also feeling like seeing how incredibly important it was for them to be together.
Absolutely. So you're opening in Cincinnati, a playhouse in the park.
We start performances Sunday. We open officially October 17th, and we run through November 10th.
Why Cincinnati? Was there a special drawing to the city, or just
well, so the producers and Wendy Goldberg, our director, Wendy had worked here before with Blake, the artistic director, and I think they have this new, very beautiful space, and we're looking to do a musical, and it seemed like a good fit. And I know there is a community. I mean, it's a play for everyone, but there's a Holocaust museum here, and there's a Jewish community here that I think is very vibrant. And so it seemed like a great place to open it.
Absolutely. Do you have any idea where you're going to go from Cincinnati for our listeners?
I hope they come, and I don't know. I think that is sorry about my background noise too, but I think I sat myself in the lobby thinking it could be a little quiet here, but I think that they're waiting, and that's the journey will continue. Hopefully, I think it's a piece of work that not just for young people, but that hopefully will find its way to many different communities.
Is there a website for the play, or some place where people can follow to, keep watching?
Yes. So if you go, well, the Ruka, if you go to cincyplay.com, you can look at Ruka. And that's probably the best place right now.
Okay.
CINCY play. And so yeah, this is the journey, this is the beginning, which is exciting. We're still learning. We're going to be rewriting and previews. We're trying new things all the time. So yeah.
And for our listeners out there, that's what Avoid the Maze is about. It is a journey, and you don't just stop. You may for a moment or two and look around and decide which direction to go. Neena, you proved that you realize that, hey, it may be exciting working for a big time comedian, but what you were doing wasn't enough for you. And so you pursued other adventures. And it seems like you've continued to do that through TV, playwriting, and even possibly music. We may see you, getting an award someday for one of your songs. And wouldn't that be?
I know this sounds so trite, but the award is really getting to do it. And I'm just excited to get to do stuff and put it out there. And I actually love your metaphor of the maze, because I feel like, oh, you do keep trying to get somewhere, but the maze is actually the fun. When you're a kid and you do a maze, it's not just getting to the end, it's running through it and trying this way and that way. And maybe in one of the dead ends, there's like a plant you never would have seen, or, there's always something that makes the maze itself exciting. And I think in a way, the older I get, the more I appreciate that the process is really the fun. It really is. And it's not just, I think, a cliche, but it actually is. Because I see people who I admire so much, and they get to one spot and it's like, what's next? What's next? So there's always, do you ever feel like you've arrived? I don't know. I'm doing a show with a dear friend, Jessica Hecht, in the spring at Baryshnikov Arts. And I've been so inspired learning and seeing a little bit from Mikhail Baryshnikov, who's been one of our great benefactors and supporters of this, which is that he is continually testing himself. He could so easily rest on his laurels of being, like the greatest dancer in the world, but he keeps going. I'm going to try clowning. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. I'm going to do a really strange production of Chekhov, which was incredible. And I just love that spirit of just continuing to go through the maze.
Well, one of the things I tell all my listeners, it's not about age. It's about taking one foot in front of the other and continuously doing that. And that's one of the things that I saw my parents do. They never stopped. And because of them, I refuse to.
I
And,
love it.
you know, my family sometimes looks at me and says, "Don't you want to take a rest?" And I say, "Someday I will rest for eternity." Until then,
We will have that moment, but right now, let's keep. My grandmother was one of my grandmothers was an artist, and she lived to 97. And when she couldn't really paint anymore, she started making these amazing little boxes that were sort of collage boxes. And I think that's it. You know, you keep engaged and keep finding things to bring something into the world.
Well, thank you for joining me today.
Thank you.
All your
Really enjoyed
information.
talking to you, Karen. So thank you.
All your information will be in the show notes. So for those listening, if you forgot something, go back, read the show notes. And if you can get to Cincinnati in the next couple of weeks, let's go see the
Please come. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Let us know what you think. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a
Okay.
wonderful day now. Bye-bye.
You too. Bye.